Hey friend, it's Avi from JustWriteMusic.com. Welcome to another video. Hello. How are you? There's an integral part of almost all music. In order for the song to succeed, it has to be executed perfectly. That's harmony. But how do we make our harmonies sound good? I got you. Before we awesomify your harmonies, if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button and bell below for more videos helping you write better music and stay sane as an artist. Now, when we refer to the harmony part in a song, we're referring to a secondary line of music that's played alongside the main melody in order to enhance it. A solid harmony can be the difference between a section of a song completely knocking it out of the park and just kind of feeling meh. So it's really crucial to be able to wield harmony with intention and with mastery. We're going to explore the different types of harmonies using intervals and through intervallic pairs. In order to make things nice and easy, I've arranged our intervallic pairs in the order of consonant to dissonant. And to be clear, this is consonant in terms of how our ears perceive the harmony, not like mathematical ratios and stuff. I'm not that guy. So first, we're starting off all the way at the very end of the spectrum, and the most consonant to our ears we can get are thirds and sixths. Sixths. I hate English. These are the harmonies that most people would say sound the sweetest or sound the best, and they're not necessarily wrong. They're also the best to start off with in terms of if you're a beginner to writing harmony because they just sound so good right off the bat. It's pretty hard to mess up, actually. Now, to find a third from any starting pitch, all you have to do is count every other note. That's it. We went over this in another video. Here it is. It's up there somewhere. So if we're starting on C, the next note we're going to go to is D, but we're skipping that. We're going every other note. So we're skipping D, and next note after that is E. So C, E. That's a third. Now, if we're trying to find a third below our starting pitch, we do the exact same thing, but just going backwards. We're starting on C. The note below C is B, and we're skipping that every other note, and so the note below that is A. C, and then A below would be a third below C. Now, to find a sixth, we can do the counting and all that. That works, and that's fine. Instead, I'm going to give you a nifty little trick to get to a sixth. All we do is go a third below and just bring that up an octave, and boom. The reason why this works is the same reason why they are paired together. They are inversions of each other. So when you add a sixth to a third, you get an octave. When you add a third to a sixth, you get an octave. This means that an A is a third below C, but also a sixth above C. It all depends on what octave and what register we're talking about and where our starting pitch is. The voicing of these intervals, or the arrangement and distance between them, can alter the feeling of the harmony itself, even though the pitches aren't technically changing. Not even technically, they're not changing at all. But because we're still just dealing with thirds and sixths, they sound fantastic all the time. You can do them in parallel, one after another, without issue, and it's great. Here's a short transcription of a Debussy piece that heavily features thirds, and you'll immediately just be like, wow, this is the most gorgeous thing I've ever heard. I mean, if you're me. Okay, so those are thirds, really easy to use, really hard to mess up, and they just sound amazing right off the bat. Cool, not a problem. Let's move on to our next intervallic pair. This time we're moving a little bit more down the spectrum from super consonant to kind of consonant, fourths and fifths. Fourths and fifths aren't as useful as thirds and sixths. In fact, in music school, doing fourths and fifths in parallel is a big no-no, even in the 21st century, for some reason. Now, they do it just to make sure you know how to write counterpoint the right way before you start doing whatever you want to do, which, like, sure, whatever, fine. You learn stuff just to unlearn it. For all you guitarists out there, a fifth is also the interval that you're using anytime you play a power chord. Say you're a blues player and do a lot of bar double stops, that's what fourths sound like. Alright, we're definitely making Palestrina turn over in his grave at this point. And that's because they definitely have a place in composition. Even if we're using more or less Western and tonal sounds, that doesn't mean we can't use parallel fourths and fifths for really cool colors, or using them as a break from thirds every once in a while in a very strategic way. Just like thirds and sixths are inversions of each other, so are fourths and fifths. If you add a fifth to a fourth, you get an octave. You add a fourth to a fifth, you get an octave. To find a fourth or a fifth from any note, all you have to do is take your starting pitch, let's say C, and count up from there using your fingers, literally C, D, E, F, G. Oh, F was 4, G was 5. That's it. You got it. Done. Now, you've probably heard me say the word parallel, doing things in parallel or parallel motion. All this means is having fourths or fifths right next to each other, like in succession. So a fourth, a fourth, a fourth, a fourth, a fifth, a fifth, a fifth, a fifth. This is supposed to be a big no-no, and usually the sound kind of stands out to even to regular people listener ears. Regular people listener ears. It doesn't matter. It's really only a big no-no if you're writing like music from the 17th and 18th centuries. We can literally do whatever we want. If it sounds good to your ears, just use it. Here's an example of a section using parallel fourths that I'm using in that 4-horn piece that I am currently finishing. Okay, on to the next intervallic pair. We are finally getting our hands a little bit dirty with some dissonance. And we're going to be talking about seconds and sevenths. Now, these intervals are decidedly dissonant, some of the most dissonant stuff you can really come across, but can also add some very real beauty and color to a chord. Weird. A second is literally the note next to your starting note. So the notes that we skipped before, we're talking about those notes now. So if we're starting on C, a second up would be D. And if we're still starting on C, a second down would be B. That inversion thing still applies for sevenths and seconds. So in order to find your seventh, you just take your starting pitch, go down a second, and then bump that up the octave. The exact same thing that we did to create a sixth. These can be used in a really cool way. You can use them as a spread-voiced seventh, which means they're just pretty far apart from each other. And you can also use seconds, since they're right next to each other, they have this kind of plinky sound, which can be used for a cool effect as well. Like we also mentioned, you can add sevenths or ninths, which is just a second above the octave, into chords for some really gorgeous colors and sounds that I can gush over this stuff all day. In fact, I made a video about it. Check it out here. You want to be careful here. Playing with dissonance can be a little bit tricky, and it can be difficult to get them to sound exactly the way you want, especially if you're not going for that spicy, crunchy dissonance tone. Here's an example from a dissonant part that I created, but I didn't want it to be too dissonant. I just wanted to kind of hint at the dissonance and go through this kind of chaotic tumultness. I didn't want it to be the star of the show necessarily. Check it out. Number 4. This is the last pair, and it's different than all the rest. We're finally talking about the tritone. A tritone, also called the devil's note, metally enough, this one is probably the most recognizable by ear just for how dissonant and how specific the sound is. Now, this is different from the other pairs that we're talking about, because those were inversions. These are actually enharmonic equivalents, which means they are the same exact pitch. We're just calling them by different names. Starting from C, we're going up a tritone that would be either an F sharp or a G flat, and then one that we use depends on the context, which means like the harmony, the ascension or descension of the melodic line. There's some stuff to consider there. What's cool about this also, though, is that the tritone represents an exact middle point in the octave. If you add a tritone to a tritone, you get an octave. This has nothing to do about writing music. I just thought that was cool. Now, if you're looking for quick and easy dissonance, tritones are the go-to. You can add it to a chord for some real crunch. Here's a C9 flat 5 chord. And the sharp 4 is very prominent in the Lydian mode, which instead of it being very dissonant, actually gives it a kind of a bright feeling to it. On its own, it spice, it crunch. The tritone is a force to be reckoned with, so use it wisely. It's the devil's note, after all, and we don't want to shame the devil. I mean, we don't want to let the devil down. I mean,
Hail Satan.
Okay, that's it. There you go. That's how harmonies work. That's all you need to do to make them sound good. You just stack them up, especially thirds and sixths. Boom, 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 boom. You're good. You've got your thirds and sixths, which are fantastic go-tos. You've got your fourths and fifths, which can be pretty cool and structural and give you some sweet parallel sound motion things. Words. The fourths and fifths are useful for coloring, for taking breaks from the thirds and fifths, and for torturing Palestrina. The seconds and sevenths were surprisingly useful as well, and really have quite a gorgeous sound, especially when spaced far apart. Dissonant, but applicably consonant? Weird. And finally, our tritone, which is just glorious. It's crunchy, and you can also make it sound really bright in the right context. Very cool stuff. Remember that the most important part of writing a harmony is to use your ears. If it sounds good, use it. That's all you really need. Something that you hear in music school, your harmonies should be able to stand on their own melodic 2 feet. And what that means is your harmonies should be able to sound okay on their own, apart from the melody. That means we're often using some of the same tools to write harmonies that we are using melodies. Same stuff applies. That's why I want to tell you about my free guide, 7 ways to write a more effective melody. This thing is totally free. You just go grab it, go download it. You won't regret it, I promise. This can totally transform your melody making. You can workshop them and just, they're great. They're gonna be great. Head to justwritemusic.com. There's a link down in the doobly-doo. Thank you guys so much for watching and for hanging out with me today. I'm Avi from justwritemusic.com, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out.